The South Downs Way, 100 miles from Winchester to Eastbourne in 7 days in June 2014. When I decided to walk the South Downs Way in June 2014, I was very fortunate to have Sherpas on hand to ferry me backwards and forwards at the start and end of each day and provide me with accommodation each night. My husband Steve was working in Portsmouth at the time, and we stayed at his house there each night while I was walking the first half of the trail. For the second half of the route, Steve's brother and family very kindly offered Sherpa services and accommodation at their home in Stenning, a small picturesque town nestled just below the South Downs Way, about 2/3 of the way along the route. First, some nerdy facts about the South Downs Way. Total ascent, 13,620 feet. The South Downs Way is one of the most popular of the 16 national trails in England and Wales. The route follows prehistoric droveways that have been in use for at least 6,000 years. Most of the route follows bridleways. Consequently, each year, walkers, 15,000 of them, share it with a lot of cyclists, 5,000 of those, and horse riders, 2,000 of those. It has been estimated that around 39 million people visit the South Downs National Park each year, compared to 24 million visitors to the Lake District National Park. A huge amount of groundwater is extracted from the South Downs each year, enough to fill 86,000 Olympic-sized swimming pools. William Blake was inspired by the South Downs to write his famous hymn, Jerusalem. The South Downs have also served as inspiration for many other famous writers, composers and poets, including Lord Tennyson, Hilaire Belloc, Charles Kingsley, Algernon Swinburne, Rudyard Kipling, John Galsworthy, Virginia Woolf, Edward Thomas, E.M. Forster, Ralph Vaughan Williams, Edward Elgar and T.S. Eliot. The start. The start of my journey outside Winchester Cathedral at 6:30 in the morning. I had the cathedral to myself at 6:30 a.m. Winchester Cathedral. Just 99 miles to go. Old Granary, perched on Staddlestones in Chilcombe. I'm everywhere and nowhere baby. 3 miles into my epic journey. Beautiful cottage near the end of my first day in East Meon after a 20-mile day. The in-betweens. Another 20 miles between East Meon and Cocking on day 2. Highest point on the South Downs Way, Butser Hill at 889 feet on day 2, overlooking the Queen Elizabeth Country Park below on the left. Having a coffee with my gorgeous Sherpa at the end of day 3 at the Riverside Tea Rooms on the River Arun in Amberley, yet another 20 miles. Most painful. Ouch, ouch, and triple excruciating ouch. Every walk has its challenges, and on the South Downs Way I was presented with a new, seemingly insurmountable challenge. After pounding along for 20 miles a day for the first 3 days, I was almost stopped in my tracks at the end of day 3 by the most horrendous massive blister which had formed underneath the big toenail of my right foot, and a smaller one on my left big toe. Although I had switched to new lighter leather boots following my first experience of blisters on the Ridgeway, I was once again blighted by the blister curse. Despite my prevention strategies, ridge walking had once again taken its toll, compounded this time by the fact that my feet had grown and my boots were actually too small, causing undue pressure on my big toes. Who would ever believe that your feet get larger as you get older? It's a sad fact of life about which I had previously been blissfully unaware. I had also made another mistake. The day before I started my walk, I was performing with my belly dance group and was still wearing nail varnish on my toenails. Consequently, I had not cut my toenails. I now know that it is very important to cut one's toenails very short in order to avoid the black nail syndrome. Drastic measures were required because I knew that I would not be able to continue the next day unless I could relieve the agonizing pain. Fortunately, Steve had picked me up at the end of my day, and we were going to be staying with his brother in Steyning that night. But first he took me to an outdoor shop in Portsmouth, where I bought a pair of walking sandals. I was hoping that sandals would enable me to walk without pressure on my toes, although I knew I would also have to switch to manual pain override during the last 4 days of my walk. That evening, after drinking copious amounts of alcohol, I summoned up enough courage to stick a sterilized needle through my big toenail and drain the blister. Instant relief. But the blister kept forming and I had to keep draining it. Over the next few days, I applied loads of arnica and allowed nature to take its course by exposing my toes to fresh air and salty water. We went to the beach several times and I paddled in the sea. This seemed to do the trick, and I was able to complete my final 4 shorter days, albeit more slowly. Initially, I found it harder to walk in sandals, especially because they offer no ankle support, but after a couple of days I had made the adjustment and was able to make good progress. 6:45 in the morning on day 4 on the Amberley to Bramber stage, 13 miles. The sun was already blazing hot, and I was hobbling along in my new sandals. Chanctonbury Ring. Chanctonbury Ring is the site of Bronze and Iron Age hill forts and a Roman temple. According to legend, if you run around the trees in an anti-clockwise direction, you will summon the devil, who will offer you a bowl of soup in exchange for your soul. In witchcraft, anti-clockwise, or widdershins, means going against the usual direction, and is used when casting a circle for binding or banishing spells. This is yet another example of how the secular authorities have twisted pagan traditions to mean something sinister. I felt distinctly uneasy when I walked past the ring. It felt like one of those places which I have come to associate with negative energy. It was not until later that I heard that it is reputed to be one of the most haunted locations on the South Downs. Me and my shadow, between Chanctonbury Ring and Steyning. Steve and I had a cuppa here at this charming little tea house in Steyning. South Ease Church is one of just 3 churches in Sussex which have round towers. Paragliders on Bostel Hill between South Ease and Alfriston. The end. There are 2 official routes for finishing the South Downs Way. One of these is an inland bridleway alternative via Jevington, which passes England's largest chalk hill figure, the Long Man of Wilmington. But how could I miss out on the Seven Sisters and Beachy Head? and besides, I had already seen the long man on a previous visit. So, despite my handicap, which by day 4 was healing nicely, I decided to go for the longer route, 10.5 miles from Alfriston to Eastbourne via the Seven Sisters. At various stages along the trail, I was almost run over on several occasions by some of the many enthusiastic cyclists who hurtle along the trail at breakneck speed. One memorable incident occurred as I was traversing the Seven Sisters and met a group of 3 cyclists who were on a mission. They would come roaring past me as they raced down each downhill section and then pedal like lunatics to reach the top of each uphill section. However, each time they summited, various parts of their bikes broke down as they were cycling up, and they then had to spend ages fixing them. By the time they were ready to enter the fray again, I had reached the top and overtaken them. This developed into a sort of friendly competition, and we had a lot of fun teasing each other about hares and tortoises. Eastbourne, seen from the end of the trail. Here I am at the end of my epic journey in Eastbourne. Flora and fauna. Spotted orchids on Butser Hill. Spotted orchids are rich in mucilage, which forms a soothing and demulcent jelly used in the treatment of irritations of the gastrointestinal tract. The open chalk downs are a paradise for flora and fauna. They are home to 30 different species of orchids and around 50 different species of butterflies. I walked through vast fields of oxeye daisies, which have traditionally been used for treating respiratory complaints. There are said to be a total of around 110,000 to 125,000 sheep grazing on the South Downs at any one time. I walked in splendid isolation most days with just cows and sheep for my companions. Strangely enough, I hardly met any other walkers who were walking the whole trail. Field poppies. The flowers of the field poppy have long been used as an anodyne for soothing mild aches and pains, such as toothache, earache, and sore throats. A mild sedative or relaxant, an expectorant for treating catarrh and coughs, as a digestive, and even for reducing the appearance of wrinkles and in lipstick. Lessons learnt. Cut your toenails before any long-distance walk. Make sure that your boots are not too small. Chanctonbury Ring is haunted.